Chapter 7 on support reading. Support reading is a part of the literacy component of this unit of work. I hope you've enjoyed the last 11 going on 12 months and you are well underway to completing your cert for in education support. We have roughly 4 more subjects to go and hopefully we'll be finished by the middle, if not end of March. And this is chapter 11. Hope you enjoy. When you have completed this chapter, you should be able to understand what literacy is in terms of reading, writing, and language. You should be familiar with the stages of development in regards to reading. You should also be aware that there is a range of reading programs that are available to schools, TAs, and teachers. Your school probably has its own systems, which you should become familiar. You should also be able to understand the relationship between reading, spelling, writing, as well as vocabulary. That you can implement a range of techniques, including direct instruction, to support reading development in the classroom for both primary and secondary school students. That you can set up a physical environment to support the reading activities, otherwise known as literacy circles or literacy rotations or literacy groups, depending upon your school, as well as to demonstrate an ability to access a wide range of reading resources to support students in the development of the literacy skills. Learning to read is a significant milestone and is essential for future academic success. Reading requires understanding that letters form words and that when put together in a deliberate way, words create meaning. We call this comprehension. Reading is a skill that typically requires direct instruction. The importance of literacy. It's important to remember that literacy includes reading, writing, as well as language skills. Reading obviously refers to the ability to draw sounds from letters and then put those letters and sounds into words. Putting words in sentences, and then to copy those sentences in the format of writing, so developing writing skills. Language refers to a student's ability to draw context or meaning from those sentences, and also to understand that different text strategies produce different text types. Literacy and vocabulary development. Oral vocabulary refers to the words that we use in speaking. Reading vocabulary refers to words recognised when used in print. New vocabulary should be explored in texts that allow students to use associated words or phrases to work out the meaning of unfamiliar words. Students can also explore the meaning of new words by using a thesaurus and/or a dictionary. Types of word learning include learning a new meaning for a known word, learning that meaning for a new word representing a known concept or an unknown concept, clarifying and enriching the meaning of a new word. If you have a look in this chapter's in practice on individual words and word meanings for further instruction, this will assist you in assisting students to help to develop their vocabulary skills. Here in table 11.2 from the text, you'll see, based upon the Australian English curriculum, there is a literacy continuum, which includes both language and literacy skills, in which the Australian curriculum is wanting teachers or students, I should say, to develop as a part of their educational process. Just press pause and take a moment to have a look through those and become familiar with them. Literacy and the curriculum. The New South Wales Department of Education and Training has identified 8 critical aspects of literacy learning. You may wonder why we're looking at New South Wales Department of Education in a Victorian-based subject. That's because your qualification will actually be able to give you skills and or opportunities for employment in all states throughout Australia, as a Cert 4 is nationally qualified. And we do live in a border town, guys, so if you ever happen to get work over at Miama Grammar or Miama Public School, then understanding the New South Wales Department of Education criterion might be an important skill for you, especially if you're applying for jobs or having interviews in those areas of your region. So in regards to New South Wales Department of Education's 8 critical aspects of literacy, what they are wanting students to develop is an ability to understand and read text, develop comprehension, develop their vocabulary, develop their aspects of writing, develop their aspects of speaking, be able to use phonics, be able to use phonic awareness, and understand concepts about print. Print refers to different ways in which text can be published. This may include things such as a novel or perhaps a newspaper article, otherwise known as an information text. There are several stages of reading. Here we'll look at 5, stage 1 through to stage 5. We have emergent, experimental, early reading and writing, transitional, and independence and productive. What they suggest that at stage one, an educator or a parent would assist the student to connect words to pictures such as cat, mat, hat, etc., etc. And then students could then experiment by looking at the picture. They could then guess what the word might say. Then they develop early reading and writing skills as those words and as those letters become familiar to their memories. They then develop into transitional reading, which is their ability to connect 2, 3, 4, 5 words in a row, and then writing to actually copy those words down onto a sheet of paper. I'm sure you remember the early days in primary school, even sometimes in middle school for students who are at risk with their writing or perhaps have lacking good, genuine writing skills. Students actually trace words with dots and then lines, and then the next line actually copy it freehand. And with each development of skill, the activity becomes more and more independent regarding the student's ability to get that task achieved. And then finally, we have independent and productive reading and writing, where students are able to either select or they are given books at their appropriate level of reading and writing, and they are independently able to read their way through those texts and draw meaning from them, and then be able to write something about them in terms of what they understood that text to mean and what was important parts of those texts, what were the characters in the text, where did the text take place, and what was their favourite part of the text or story, are some of the things that students might write about after studying a piece of writing. A balanced reading program requires students to do a range of things. This includes code breaking, which we'll learn more about during your role on placement, meaning making, text using, and text analysing. All these are also within your text, guys, so flick through and have a look. Otherwise, don't hesitate to access Dr. Google and then try and draw your own meaning from them. YouTube's also a fantastic example here in regards to how you can understand what these 4 different aspects require you to do as a TA to assist students develop their reading skills. The relationship between reading, spelling, and writing. Spelling and reading are independent. That means that just because a student can spell doesn't necessarily mean they can read, and vice versa. Regular reading experiences expose students to written words and spelling instruction. So as students become familiar with words by sight seeing, then from memory they can recall how those words should be spelt based on how familiar they are with them. So when students get their spelling words, it's important that they glance over them, obviously practice writing them, but also practice putting them into sentences. And your teacher will have a range of strategies to assist students develop those reading skills, which expose students to written words, which supports their spelling. As parents, I'm sure a lot of you guys have actually practiced this yourselves with their readers or their take-home assignments also. Reading experiences assist in spelling skill and reading development, quite obviously. Phonical awareness. Phonics, guys, refers to sound, and sometimes it's very important that we use sounds to assist students to break down or decode words. For instance, if you actually look at the word phononical, you use the word phone, phono, phonological, and then you try and put it together to create sound. So even though these larger words may seem more complicated for students, if we can break them down into sounds that they are familiar with, then obviously those words will be much, much easier for them to break down and recall and spell. OTs and some teachers will specialise in phonological reading development. They've done specialist training in which they'll be able to use table 11.4 here in front of you to use a range of phonological skills as well as examples to the right to assist students to break down words. Press pause here for a moment, take a flick through each one of those skills and examples, and try to become as familiar as you can with these phonological skill developments or stages, as they're a good strategy for you as a TA to assist the student to break down unknown words. Just before I do move on though, I would like to make it evident to you that when students select a book to practice reading, or if they're given a book to read, the best way to understand if or not that book is at the appropriate level is based upon the number of mistakes a student makes on a page or in a sentence. So as a rule of thumb, we don't want the student to be able to read from the front of the book to the back of the book without making any errors. That text would be too easy for the student. But we also don't want them making a lot of mistakes. Making a lot of mistakes will actually inhibit the student's learning. It will also stop them from developing flow. from sentence to sentences, from word to word. So the rule of thumb basically is that if a student makes more than 2 mistakes per page, then that book is just too hard. Practice that with your own students tonight or whilst you're on placement. And if a student is selecting their own book, or if you're selecting a book for them, have them read 1 or 2 pages. And if they're making more than 2 mistakes, then go back a level and try and find them an easier book. We don't want them, as I said, not making any mistakes at all, because that means the words are just too easy. And we don't want them making lots of mistakes, which, as I said before, breaks down their flow, which actually affects their ability to draw meaning from the text, as they'll read each singular word, similar to a robotic reading, as opposed to reading with nice consistency, as if having a conversation with you or I. Practice that during the week and let me know how you go. Here's some more information on phonemes. Phonemes are the smallest parts of the word that you use in spoken language. Okay, what this means is that you can identify and categorize sounds, combine or blend separate sounds, break words into segments or into separate sounds, delete or add sounds to form new words, or even isolate the first or last sound of a word, which students can then use to code a sound and break it down. The only way guys really get good at those awareness skills is actually practice them yourself by reading them to other students and having other students read to you, which is why listening to students read is a very, very, very important role of your job as a TA. It might not seem like a very important job, but trust me, it is. And to be honest, I think the most effective thing that you guys can do as TAs is listen to kids read, make sure they're choosing the appropriate text, i.e. not making more than 2 mistakes per page and not reading through without mistakes. And helping them to develop that nice consistent flow between words and sentences. At the end of each page, or perhaps at the end of each chapter, at the end of each book, then ask the students to recall information from the text. What kind of shirt was Billy wearing? Why was Sally sad? What did Johnny get for his birthday? And what was your favourite part of the story? Are things that students can use to draw knowledge from the text that will assist them to develop their comprehension and understanding from the information they're reading, which is the whole point of reading anyway. Okay, so phonics relates, as we just described, to the ability to decode written words by matching letters or letter combinations and patterns and sounds. It involves making the connection between the single sound, which is the phoneme, and relating letter patterns, which is grams, when reading and writing. Phonics are taught in a similar manner, and there is a huge range of activities that can be used to support phonic awareness. Reading fluency. Reading fluency is the ability to read fluently, which is as per a conversation, with accuracy and with expression. So another little strategy there, guys, is when students are reading, have them stop and take a breath at each full stop, and have them look for expression marks, quotation marks, and have them change their voice by an octave or 2, or make up a silly voice for a character they're about to read for. And when you have an exclamation mark, have them say that word louder. So there are 3 really, really simple strategies where students can look at the different codes within a text to assist them to draw meaning from it, being when a character speaks using the quotation marks and speaking in a funny voice, or if a letter is written quite large or in bold or has an exclamation mark, then that particular word is actually just said louder. As students become more familiar with that, their brain will actually process the words ahead of what they're reading. And as they come up to that word, they'll be able to say that word with expression or with fluency and with accuracy without necessarily needing to stop. That's a nice start. We'll talk about that more on Monday. Phonological awareness. So here's a link to the Australian curriculum. Jump on Google now, guys, press pause and have a flick at the Australian curriculum phonical awareness guide and have a look through these key components. Let me know what you think. Press pause now and have a flick through them. Continue with the presentation. Supporting reading in the classroom. So the way a classroom is set up and where you position yourself in the classroom and where students are positioned to develop their reading is a very, very, very important role of your job. We want to make sure, number one, that students are comfortable and where they are, as they may be sitting in that position for maybe 15, 20 minutes at a time. We want to make sure that they're not going to be distracted by objects or people or sounds around them. So obviously want to make sure there's not too much transition happening in the area that you're in. You also want to make sure the environment is nice and cool or nice and warm and comfortable also. If your students require fidget toys or things like that, make sure you have them ready and they're on the table to begin with. And students that are a little bit fidgety, try and give them more frequent breaks. So might read a couple of pages, then have a spell, a couple of pages, and have a spell. To assist your students with their reading in the classrooms. You obviously want to make sure that your programs include opportunities for reading, which is age and skill development appropriate. It includes both fiction, which is true stories, which is not true stories, and non-fiction, which are true stories. Reading opportunities may include small groups, one-on-one, and follow-up activities. Assessment of reading. Reading is continuously assessed and evidence of each student's skill and knowledge are gathered over time. Identified strugglers may be involved in more detailed assessment. NAPLAN. We spoke about NAPLAN a few weeks ago. This occurs in May, where literacy and numeracy skills are assessed for all Australian students in years 3, 5, 7, and 9. And hopefully you guys have a good understanding now as to why NAPLAN is an important part of the literacy strategy. It enables us to pick up weaknesses for students in grade 3, and then it gives us 2 years to develop those weaknesses into strength for the time we hit grade 5, 7, and 9. Without NAPLAN, we actually can't map out a future for the curriculum for that particular school. And it also makes putting students into learning ability groups much easier as well. And yes, NAPLAN is just one day, it's one snapshot in the day of a child, but when you look at NAPLAN for grade 3, for instance, as well as their transitional information from grade 2 and the anecdotal evidence you've been gathering in February, March and May, then obviously you can put that information together with NAPLAN from the previous year to put students into appropriate literacy groups, which will then provide them with the appropriate support they need to develop those skills that NAPLAN identified as being in need of further development. Supporting struggling readers. Intentional teaching is required for those students who struggle with reading. This may include the introduction of new skills and knowledge that builds on pre-existing skills and knowledge, identifying the level of mastery required by the student, regular opportunities for systematic revision and practice, prompt and specific corrective feedback, and systematic monitoring and documentation. Listening to students read. This is actually a really lovely part of your day. When I was in the classroom, it was the best way to start my day. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a great way to get to know the students too, and it enables you to pick up on students' names very quickly. Now remember as well, your role as a TA isn't just to support the integrated student, it's to support all students. So if you're doing a literacy circle, you actually might only spend 2 or 3 minutes with a student that's at risk, or 2 or 3 students that the student's actually funded. But then you might spend the next 15, 20 minutes with the other students in the classroom to support their skills as well. You'll work with the teacher in regards to how much time you'd like put into the group in general, or you might find yourself pulling away 3 or 4 of the lower reading students and doing some more targeted reading with them. But listening to student read allows you a number of things. It allows you to provide feedback to the student as well as the teacher. It allows you to document the student's progress, which is very important, especially in terms of their ILP. And it will assist you to assist the student to identify errors and use information gathered for future planning. You can also use that time to discreetly work with students on developing a couple of skills, such as pausing at a full stop or speaking loudly when a word is in bold or in large or has an exclamation mark, or when students feel stuck, they can use their phonetic skills to break down or decode a word, or sometimes they can look at the picture and put the word that they're stuck on against perhaps a picture within the text and use the picture to help decode that word. There's some simple strategies that you can use as a TA to help develop students develop their reading skills. You only do that, guys, if you actually spend time with them on the floor or in a chair, listening to them read. Prompting, reminding, viewing, and instructing. Reading development requires a supportive relationship between the reader and listener. That's you. Before commencing reading, students can be encouraged to review possible strategies when faced with challenging words. Students will actually already have their own strategies, guys, they prefer to use. So when you start the text, before you start the text, always ask the student, okay, Johnny, before we start reading this text today, when you get stuck, what reading strategy are you going to use? And there's a range of reading strategies that students can use depending upon your school and what strategy they promote to help decode a word into a sentence. You may have visual prompts on the table, you may have posters in and around the classroom that you can also refer students to in terms of assisting them to break down more challenging words. And here's half a dozen strategies here you can also look at. Creating reading environments. The classroom environment can be used to promote and encourage good reading habits. A reading area is conducive to quiet reading, research, or quiet group discussions should be considered. Functional reading may be used around the classroom. This may include things like word walls or labels or opportunities for students to create reading resources themselves, or they might profile authors or illustrators depending upon what the text is they're studying. Reading resources. Guys, next to listening to students read and assisting with the development of resources, this is probably an area that you will have to become very, very good at if you want your contract to become an ongoing position. Teachers, as we know, are very, very time poor. Schools are very, very lean in terms of money and what they can and can't spend money on, but also only you know your students. So in terms of you being able to develop reading resources which target your student skills directly, only you will really know what's best for them. And your school will provide you with time to access, set up and create a variety of reading resources. And sometimes you'll have little brainstorms or you'll attend a PD, or you'll find something fantastic on Pinterest or on YouTube or on Facebook somewhere, and you're going to want to try and use those strategies within your classroom. Once again, before you get too carried away, always go back to your classroom teacher and say, hey, look, wouldn't mind knocking up a worksheet for Johnny? What I'm thinking is blah, 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 blah. What are your thoughts on that? That'll save you from spending hours and hours and hours putting together a resource that may already exist. Chances are it probably does already exist. Or putting together a resource that perhaps probably isn't as appropriate as what the teacher wants it to be. What I mean by appropriate is that, please consider the teachers do have up to 4 years of training, not to mention work and life experience in assisting students to read. And using the teacher's skill and knowledge to develop those resources is absolutely crucial. And like I mentioned, chances are the teacher probably already has most strategies anyway, or perhaps they've used them in the past and they haven't worked. But always please make sure you go back to your teacher and speak to them about the resource you're wanting to develop. And if by all means you get the thumbs up, then yeah, go and knock yourself out and get good at laminating and get good at photocopying and get good at sticking on Velcro on the back of things, because once you've created them, guys, you don't want to keep creating them every year, you want to recycle them. So always keep yourself a big literacy tub, and all the beautiful, wonderful resources you make, stick them in that tub at the end of the term or at the end of the day or end of the year, and recycle them and pass them on and use them throughout your teaching career. Now remember, if you've actually made those resources at school, then technically they are the intellectual property of the school, meaning you actually can't take them home or keep them. So my advice is, whenever you come across a really beautiful, fantastic idea that you think would be awesome, make 2 copies. Make a copy for the school and keep it in the teacher resource folder. Make a copy for yourself and take it home and stick it in a plastic tub somewhere. That way, if you move schools or if you change teachers or change students, or perhaps if you lose resource, then you've got something to fall back upon. And it takes a while to warm up the photocopy and to warm up the laminator anyway. So knocking out 6 laminated sheets is not much more difficult than knocking out 12. So if you get a chance, make resources for your classroom, but also put a couple to the side for yourself as well for use down the track. Reading and technology. Technology can be used in the classroom by students of any ability to enhance their knowledge and skills. Some schools have compulsory ICT programs where there may be an ICT rotation within the classroom, or perhaps some secondary schools, for instance, might have a laptop program where students are going to get most of their reading resources from the internet or from online resources. Please keep in mind that at this point, computer programs have not replaced books. If you go to the library, I'm sure you'll find more books in the library than what you'll find laptops or computers. But as far as ease and commercial use, then obviously, technologies have their own place. We'll talk about the link between ICT and reading next week. The research is rather controversial, and the evidence hasn't yet proven that the more technology, the more the more technology that's used to develop literacy skills, the better, isn't yet seen. And so it still seems to be that the old pen and paper still seems to be the way to go. But we'll talk more about this next week. Guys, that brings us to the end of our supporting education, literacy week 11, or chapter 11, I should say. This will be an interesting week. It will be a relatively short one. Christmas is coming up around the corner. This assessment isn't due until the 14th of January. So if you want to smash it out this week and get it back to me, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, I'd honestly prefer that you hold on to this assessment and really become familiar with your role in literacy over the Christmas break, as developing those literacy skills is a very, very important role as your job as a TA. And it's probably the most important thing you can do with students too, is to help them read and help them to write. Many students can get through school and get through life if they're not particularly good at maths, but being able to read and being able to write is an absolutely crucial life skill, I believe, both professionally and personally. So get good at teaching students how to read, get good at teaching them how to write. Over the school holidays, do some research, smash out some resources, and I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with in a couple of weeks. Have an awesome break, and I'll catch you all on Monday. Ciao.